For a second, February 22nd.
So moved, Mayor Johnson.
Mayor Johnson, second by Mayor Wright. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you. Number 4 is roundtable discussion, flood, sharing ideas of public information and mitigation. I'm not really sure where this is going to go. Did anybody, I think we're all concerned about what's about to hit us out of the mountains. Was there anything from the MAG staff we were going to directly talk about on this, or is this kind of an open forum?
Have you received an email from Peter Quintner, our emergency management lead in Utah County?
I don't know that I have.
I don't have either.
Then I'll get with him.
on our chief.
It may have been, but there's been communication, ongoing communication between the state, us, and I thought the chiefs. So I'll ask him to send out the outline to all the mayors as well.
I've been in touch with Richard Nelson, Public Works, and had some questions about our canyon. I would imagine there'd be other questions about other canyons in the counties. The concerns about landslides because of the wetness of the ground. He reassured me that the geologists they've been working with back in 1983 and 84, it had got the moisture got down into around 21 inches, which was a concern for landslides, which we had some. He feels like there's going to be limited episodes of that, isolated ones. The more likely events are the avalanches that we're hearing about right now because of the heavy snow that has come, and it'll just slide right off. And so I'm sure that he expressed to me that that if they get equipment in there, they will. If they can't, they'll use explosives to get it cleared.
At this point, he says that the state hydrologist says that right now we're about 3 to 4 inches down in the way of water, so we're not nearly like it was back in
1983,
83 collapse there. So, but what I'll do is I'll follow up with both the emergency management guy and our public works guy and ask them to send a joint email out to state what we've done so far, where we are.
Is there, that information, like, is there a hotline if somebody gets in a bind and they need resources, or?
Let's follow up with them to send that information out to you.
Okay. I don't anticipate Goshen has any problems, but there might be somebody that thinks they're covered and they need more resources for something big or something, right? So.
Couple ideas of, these are just things we're doing. We've cleared channels. We've tried everything to get messages out there as far as what we've done, what they could do. People that have a ditch in front of the house that's been dry for 10 years now, they're worried about it getting flooded. So there's misperceptions that we have to clear up. One thing I think is maybe important to talk about, because we've gone to the point where what if we have to have an EOC, literally open up, we have a breach. We have to get a big share of the American AF Canyon right through the heart of our city into the lake. Just get it there and say, okay, sure. So as we understand it, the legal route, if we do have to declare a state of emergency, is that we have documentation that is really declaring it to go to the county. The county, you support that, and then we have access, and there's a whole mechanism. We went through tabletops on how to collect data and to make sure that we have that information, so there can be a reimbursement on the expenses that we're doing after the declaration has happened. So I would say if we could have quick access to the county, because really if we do have to declare a state of emergency. I haven't said that out loud. It's just me being recorded. Because I just don't want our residents, we want them to be ready, or we don't want them to panic.
There's a lot of panic out there. I just had one of my citizens get a hold of me and want to know where to get sandbags for the flood that's going to happen next week. So what we're going to do with those sandbags, we're going to have a citizen involved sandbagging event that we're going to fill sandbags on the 17th of this month and again on the 22nd. And we're going to try to beat those out in the areas that are the most vulnerable to flooding.
So to that point, I had a question, and it's just, maybe I can get your opinion, Commissioner. There was some discussion about declaring the state of emergency now so that we can do something. In other words, get in the creek and do things on private property that we cannot do before an emergency happens. Because what we're worried about is, because our little Hobble Creek is probably one of the first ones to start running. And we've done lots of stuff through the winter, but it's just all those trees on the side, they get undermined. And it doesn't take more than 1 or 2 trees to block under a bridge, and then it starts to run through a neighborhood. And our concern is, are there powers that we can use now to drop a track hoe in there and start to clear it out, rather than wait till the bridge is totally dammed up and it's running all through town?
I know Public Works is clearing ditches and rivers, areas that's in unincorporated right now. They've been doing that.
Right.
So I don't know about the city level.
You're thinking declare a state of emergency so that is funded, all the work that you do? Is that what you're saying?
The answer's funding, yes, but I'm more worried about getting sued by a property owner, which we have done, had happen. Just being able to get in and clear out things that need to be done that a property owner is not doing, and it's gonna put the city at risk for having some tree or trees.
This can this be done at the city level, or does this have to be at the county level?
Well, I'm wondering if the county can do it for the county that gives us the authorization to do.
I'll ask.
It's just a question.
Yeah, I'll ask.
Might be easier for you, Tom, to do it than all of us individually.
The one thing I did,
Bailey.
Go ahead, Brad.
So, yeah, I was, the conference I'm at, I'm with Representative Owens, folks, and they expressed some interest in helping us with that. So, yeah, we'll find out from a county if we can do that, Mayor Packard, if we can start that out. One other thing that we've talked about and is the flood prevention plan that the county tried to implement a number of years ago, but it was unsuccessful. A couple of communities were not interested, and so it died. And we have our county attorneys looking at drawing that up, and any community that would like to participate. I know we've met with Spanish Fork, and I think I've spoke with several other mayors from South County that are interested in being a part of that. That gives us the ability to act prior to the state of an emergency and have funds accessible. It's not going to help us for this year, but that is definitely something we need to discuss as we go forward. It's my understanding that Provo and Orem did not want to participate. And so whenever this was originally proposed, it died because of that. And so think about that. If that's something that's going to be on your radar as we obviously continue to work through this flood prevention program through the county, that'll give us the ability to be able to act without it being a state of emergency. But to answer your question, Mayor Packard, we will absolutely find out when and if we can already declare that emergency.
Thank you.
I was going to suggest, one thing I did is all our cities have, hot spots, bridges that aren't big enough or culverts and that. I've already authorized the pulling of those at any time. The crews are out there and they see them starting to be a significant problem. So they've been authorized to go ahead and rip them out, just tear the road out and do it to make sure that we don't have significant problems. That way they're not trying to get a hold of me in the middle of the night or, get authorization. So that's something they want to think about.
Good idea. Our two big challenges in our town are 2 railroad bridges that are so low that I'd like to rip it out.
Well, if it's an emergency, why not? I mean, I'm serious. I mean, if it's an emergency, you might check into those power. We have one item that we have area as well that I see it undermining the railroad itself. If something, fairly significant happens right there. It's probably our weakest spot in our city.
Yeah.
It's constrained by the railroad.
Make sure UTA's lines.
We've already identified a couple places if push them come to shove. One's on underneath the city road, another going into what's Heritage Village. We'll rip those out if we have to. And we've already looked at, we have the advantage of the Pauline Canal coming to our city. We have what's called lateral 20. We can pump it out and get it out to the west of our city. And we're going to talk to the farmers out there. We'd rather flood a farm ground than a house. So we're in the process of getting permission from them to be able to turn it out into we get it out there with that lateral 20.
Okay, let's,
From the perspective of an EOC, is it worth gathering together some folks next week? Talk about the process of declaring emergency, the process of pulling that together so we're not reacting to something 3 weeks from now that we know who to call.
can we rely on Brad? Let's rely on Brandon and Tom to say, what can we do and pull us
Yeah,
together.
to let them pull it together.
That's what I would do.
As long as they're willing to do that, I think that's.
I feel like with COVID, and you guys do a really good exercise, but I think that more than mayors, our chiefs know that drill. They talk with Peter, relying a lot on him. But he's the one that's actually produced documentation, gone through the process. We're really familiar with how to do it in our city and how to go through it. You know, we've done tabletops, and in fact, 2 years ago with our mock disaster was a flood there.
Yep.
And so we close the doors. We, in fact, we bring in pallets of water. We have to react as if something fairly significant is going to happen. Probably the most significant risk we've had in our city in probably half a decade. That's what's up above us.
I'd like to make sure that, you know, let's do the commission's been real good to work with. Brandon has called me and talked to me and reassured me that the resources will be there if we need. I've had Senator Mike McKell call me and express that same thing. So I think we've got some good support.
It's going to be teamwork for sure. We're teaming up with the Forest Service, who come right out of the canyon, with UDOT, with UHP even, because we cross under 2 state roads. And if those state roads get blocked for any reason, then the connectivity in that whole area of the city, the whole region will be really.
So the governor signed a proclamation and then letting the National Guard help when necessary. And we've had some National Guard members that live in base and say, hey, we're going to be available if you need us. So.
Okay, good discussion. Anybody else?
I'll offer one thing, if anybody would be interested. We've got a new public information gal, and she has done a fantastic job on our website, listing all kinds of preparations that can be made, telling about insurance. There's a lot of valuable information. It's just generally important for everybody. If anybody wants that information, if you go to our website, just look for the flood information, you'll see there's like 8 different categories. I'm glad to have her share everything with you, because a lot of this, you know, it's not hard to customize it for your city. You won't have to customize a lot of it. But for instance, we got 3 videos, I think, on a proper way to fill sandbags and stack them, because that's the biggest problem. Everybody fills them too full and they don't know how to lay them down right. And there's a lot of things that we're finding out. Volunteers just can't figure out what to do. So we're requiring them. When they call me, they say, what can I do to help? I'm like, to go to this website. You can sign up. There's a checklist to sign up for what kind of volunteer help you want to give. But of course, if they're going to fill sandbags, that's what they want to do. We require them to look at the video first. So that's still kind of in process, but it's good information if anybody's interested.
Thanks, Mark.
So Mayor, you're saying we can go to your website and just, if we need to pull that off.
If you want to, and if you can't pull up, you want to customize it somehow, just send me a note, text me or something. I'll have Gentile get it over to you and all the raw information.
Thank you.
It knows no complex to build a sandwich.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, we've got a emergency response system that we use in the city. We're always trying to build out that network of names of people who would be willing to help in an earthquake or in any kind of situation. And so with this, we're kind of pushing out there to get names of people who would be willing to help with flooding in Orem or other cities. And so we're building out that list now and working with that through our public works.
good. So it's ready to know who to go to, right?
Yeah, we go first.
Okay. No action on that. Let's go to number 5, the report card. Cameron.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, mayors, for the opportunity to join you. I'm joined today by our Deputy Director, Molly Wheeler, And our goal over the next few minutes is to return and report, let you know, in addition to what Denise has already told you, what happened during the session, and as bizarre as it is, start talking about next year. When I came and spoke to the COG back in November, we told you there were going to be a lot of big ticket items, but we weren't sure exactly where they were all going to land. There was still a lot up in the air. Looking back now that the session's been over for about 4 weeks, I probably rank this as the second most impactful session of my 15 years at the league. And I think there are some significant victories for local government that we were able to secure. Lenise hit some of these data points for you already, but we're almost at a $30 billion budget in the state of Utah. They introduced almost 1,000 pieces of legislation. This shatters the record, and we think this is a trend of the number of bills and the number of bills they're passing. Well, how many bills did we end up tracking compared to last year?
I have it up ahead, but we tracked about 243 bills, I want to say, but it was a 54% increase over last year. So we were trying to be like really stringent with what we were following, and it just exploded.
And part of that is it's a year-round legislature now. So Representative Lund was here a moment ago. I think he's left, but he would tell you that even though they only actually enact laws for 45 days, it really is year-round legislature. I want to thank the league board members who engage year-round. Mayor Kafusi is going to be the incoming league president come September. Mayor Johnson's on the league board. Mayor Fulmer of Vineyard, Councilor Malkovich from Woodland Hills, and Councilmember Egbert from Mapleton. They represent Utah County on our 21-member board. And then several of you, like Mayor Fugel and then Mayor Johnson and Mayor Westmoreland and others come regularly to the league's policy committee. Mayor Young, your staff is there, and everyone, your council members were there this year. So we really do value tremendously the feedback we get from the LPC, whether you're there in person or remotely. So like Mayor Wright, I know your staff is there almost every week remotely. We average over 200 attendees in person and remotely during the legislative session. This year we used Slido during the session to try to get feedback. We got over 3,000 responses during the session via Slido to help us take positions and steer us on key legislation. And I'll talk about a couple of those in a moment. But on this year-round legislature piece, next week, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission will have its first meeting of the interim. Next week. So the ink hasn't even dried, bills aren't even in effect yet from this past legislative session. And they're already looking for topics because the goal for the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission is to finalize their priorities by the end of May. Now, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission is essentially the governor's cabinet, president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, a representative from the League of Cities and Towns, and a representative from the Association of Counties. The league representative is Mayor John Ramsey of South Jordan. She was league president when we appointed her. She's now the league past president, but it's a 4-year term because that's the life of this commission. But most of the big ticket policy items for the last 2 years have come through this commission. We've successfully ensured that we have league representation, not just on the UEOC itself, but on all of the subcommittees that are relevant to cities: water, growth and transportation, women in the economy, so on and so forth. So I represent the league on the Growth and Transportation Subcommittee, and it's a small group of people, but most of the transportation bills that Lenise referenced and several that I'm going to reference all came through that subgroup. So this matters. It's unique in Utah to have this type of commission, but one of the main takeaways we hope to leave you with tonight is we want your input over the next few weeks of potential priorities from your individual cities and from the region, so that we can funnel them through the league board and be prepared to take potential priorities to the UEOC. So they'll meet on April 12th. They'll finalize their list of priorities on May 31st. So the next 6 weeks are going to be crucial.
Another thing that we learned this session is that we really try to be targeted with our messaging. And one of our messages, which was the state has a surplus, but cities do not, resonated. One thing we did this year that we hadn't done in the past was we tracked the aggregate fiscal impact of all of the proposed legislation and looked at what that meant for cities. And essentially, if every bill that was introduced, passed as drafted, it would have cost cities over 120 or 118 kind of formally, but the legislative fiscal analyst likes to put immeasurable and indirect cost on a lot of stuff. So we know that this is very much a low ball. But it would have had a negative impact of over $118 million ongoing on local governments. We were able to take that message and deliver it to the governor's staff, to leadership in the House and the Senate, and really say, you know, this is what you're doing to us if this all passes. And we were able to essentially negotiate that down by changing bills, by ensuring bills didn't pass, to what ultimately became a net increase in revenue for cities that Cam can talk about.
This actually dovetails into the second main message we had during the session, which was partner with local government. Don't preempt local government to plan for growth. You know, I wish there were more legislators in the room for the deliberation you just had and the deliberation that happens between cities and counties across the state, because there unfortunately are a lot of legislators who don't think local governments are capable of planning for themselves. So we were pushing this message of partner with local governments. And again, we had some pretty positive response. On the transportation funding, I mentioned at the outset that I think this is the second most impactful session of my 15 years at the league. And that's because of the dollars and cents in local transportation money. Lenise mentioned several of the bills. We've got some spreadsheets to share with you here in a moment. But let me talk about the fifth just for a moment. The fifth, under its original format, was going to expire this summer. So a small group of us met in my office last July and said, right now, we don't have any counties outside of Summit County that, at least as of last July, were ready to impose the fifth. If the local governments, if the counties did not impose that fifth, it was going to expire, and good luck getting any sort of local sales tax authorization back from the legislature. So through the UEOC subgroups, we got the idea of modifying the fifth onto one of the priority lists. That made its way through the subgroup up to the full UEOC. The full UEOC endorsed it, got into 2 different bills that were working their way through the legislative session. Well, fast forward to the last week of the session, and I was one of 3 people that was in Representative Schultz's office. He's the House Majority Leader. And Representative Schultz said to the 3 of us, we all represent local government. He said, there aren't the votes in the House of Representatives to pass the bill to modify the fifth from the 0.2 for transit to the city-county transit allocation. He said, we don't have votes, so how about we just shelve this? We'll bring it back next year. To which I responded to him, Representative Schultz, we'll get you the votes. He said, I don't know, we don't have the votes right now. I don't want a bloodbath on the floor. You guys are gonna have to do this. It's Representative Schultz, we'll get you the votes. And Molly can attest that while I was in that meeting, I was furiously texting with her and with Justin Lee, saying, give me a whip count right now so I can start reporting to Representative Schultz. And over the next 72 hours, how many of you got an email, last 72 hours, talk to your legislator? Yeah, hopefully more than just 2, but we were sending them out like crazy. And I want to thank the commissioner and UAC, because it was a joint effort between the counties and cities, pounding legislators in the House of Representatives to support this change. Well, what this change means is that going forward, 1, the tax authorization continues, but 2, all of the cities in the state now will have an additional dedicated revenue stream for transportation that you otherwise would not have had, because under the old version it was 100% of transit. So now you get that piece. Now it's tied to compliance with modern housing plans, which almost all cities are now in compliance with that. But that's how we got the door open, was to be able to say, rather than punishing cities by withholding things, let's create this new tool as an incentive. And that resonated as part of the partnership conversation. In addition to the fifth, we also were able to incorporate the road usage charge program. And Shane, that's got music to your ears, right? The old road usage charge from your prior days. The road usage charge is a program in Utah. We're one of just 3 states in the nation that has it. But the road usage charge is going to be the long-term supplement for the motor fuel tax. Maybe even turn into a full-on supplant of the motor fuel tax, but at least the supplement. UDOT is under legal obligation in state law to have a road usage charge program fully developed by 2030. There's a program ongoing right now. Some of you may be in it. There's about 4,000 vehicles at last count, I believe, that are currently in that road usage charge program. And the idea is to tie transportation to the user fee of the use on the roads. Sound familiar, Mayor? It sounds a little bit like, oh, I don't know, transportation utility fee in Pleasant Grove. But the road usage charge program until this year, all of the revenue from it was only going to state coffers. And again, through our advocacy in the UEOC and then through the session, we have successfully incorporated cities and towns into the road usage charge program. So between now and 2030, as UDOT finishes building out that road usage charge program, they'll share 30% of those revenues with cities, towns, and counties according to the B&C formula. So again, another huge victory there. On top of that, you have the active transportation money that the governor prioritized, that we supported. That's almost $100 million of combined ongoing and one-time funds flowing into transportation. And as was mentioned earlier, the rural TIF, which will not apply directly to Utah County, but the biggest takeaway for you as Utah County is that it holds the existing B&C harmless. The original version of it actually would have diverted money from cities and towns within Utah County to go to other places in the state. Instead, it's now a new revenue stream, and we were successful at keeping the B&C held harmless. So again, you don't lose any money from that new program.
Dovetailing off of that, it was a big win for rural Utah as well. So in addition to that new rural transportation investment fund, we were able to receive ongoing funding for the local administrative advisor program. Statewide, there are over 140 cities and towns that do not have full-time administrative staff, many of you in this room. And one thing we were able to secure, as I mentioned, $1.58 million ongoing. That's going to create the ability for MAG to hire one FTE, whether that's by hiring a full-time employee or by contracting with existing employees to provide that administrative support for cities and towns within the AOG. And we're really excited about that. This is going to be really transformational and give some of our smaller cities and towns the leg up that they need.
Well, and Mayor Staley, thank you. You and I had a conversation now 2 years ago where it started as a question of what can the league do to help small communities, particularly those that are on the fringe of the urban areas, where the growth is on your doorsteps and you don't have full-time staff. That conversation planted a seed, which will now blossom in this local administrative advisor program. And kudos to MAG for your lobbying as well. Dave Stewart was a tremendous asset as we were working together, and the AOGs like MAG with the league got this program across the finish line. And we believe it's the first of its kind in the country to have this sort of resource available for small cities and towns.
Do you know how that'll look in so who's that going to be available to in MAC? Like you got it?
Yeah, we've got a list, yeah. So I actually have it right here. So, and this was based,
on the top.
and I will say this was like based on this was based on like just some like staff Google searching. So if you think you belong on this list, or if you're like, no, we have someone, let us know. So we have Elk Ridge, Genoa, Salem, Woodland Hills, Cedar Fort, Fairfield, and Goshen.
Bottom of the list, that's
No.
Last.
In no particular order.
Yeah, it's in no particular order. I've sorted this Excel sheet a lot.
That sounds right, because when we used to have we used to have a South Carolina Mayor's meeting. It was always Genola and Woodland Hills and Elk Ridge that we had all these frustrations that we didn't have resources. So that, yeah, cool.
And just to add to the, I think the money is available in July.
July 1. So the money's available July 1. We are working on what the structure of this program is going to look like now. So if you have, and we're going to be soliciting feedback on that specifically at our mid-year conference. You can join us for that. If not, we're going to have flyers, and I'm happy to leave you with my contact information, trying to figure out what does this program look like so that it is helpful for you and impactful for you.
I'd personally love to. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to be involved in that. Yeah. Okay.
Two other appropriations we wanted to reference. We as a league do not get involved in specific appropriation requests for a specific road or specific bridge. Instead, what our realm is are appropriations that benefit cities generally. So for example, we mentioned the administrative advisor, but the homelessness mitigation fund is because of our advocacy. We have $5 million of ongoing money plus 2.5 of one time this year. We're hoping to convert to ongoing. And then we have implementation support for land use changes. I'll hit the land use changes in a moment. Do you want to just give a quick update on that? Piece?
Sure. So for the homeless mitigation fund, this was created in recognition that even though homelessness is a statewide issue, where services are available for homelessness is pretty focused. And the analysis we were able to do in the interim, about 15% of the population, as far as cities are concerned, provide 100% of the homeless services in the state. And of those cities, they run, it cost them about $31 million. The mitigation fund had about $10 million in it, which meant that those cities, and thus the residents therein, were shouldering about a $20 million deficit for what that cost looks like. So what we were able to do with the league board this year was to go to the state and essentially say, cities are willing to come to the table and bring more if the state is willing to do it as well. And so we recognize that we're likely never going to get a lot of these cities whole. Like Salt Lake City, for example, will likely always kind of be a focal point just based on the fact that it's the capital city and will likely always be running a deficit. But the hope is that for these smaller cities that are online providing these services like Midvale, Ogden, South Salt Lake, St. George, getting them closer to a neutral impact, which this funding will do, which we're really excited about. It's also important, and as we'll discuss when we get to HB 499, is that kind of this money is broken into tiers. The first tier are those big 5 full-time shelter cities. There's tier 2, which is the smaller shelter cities like you see in Richfield, Cedar City, that have smaller facilities and then less of an impact. But tier 3 is kind of this winter response plan to provide cities that step up to provide those winter crisis kind of shelter options with that support to help offset. And as that expands now into second-class counties, starting in the winter of 25-26, it was really important that we get more money into this fund because there are more mouths we need to feed. And so this is the state funding, as Cam mentioned. We're working to get that converted into ongoing. We're pretty optimistic about that. Yeah.
On the land use change appropriation, I had a meeting with Speaker Wilson second last week of the session. So we were working through all the land use bills and ultimately went to him and said, look, the subdivisions bill, which we talked about extensively at the LPC, but it's a heavy lift for cities to modify how we do our subdivisions. So we need to recognize that a city like Payson is going to have different resources than Woodland Hills will have, which is different than Norm or Provo. So we need to have varied timeframes in order for the different communities to implement that. And does Cedar Hills have an in-house city attorney?
Yes.
Okay, so Cedar Hills does, but Alpine, you guys contract
Well, we
out.
share. We have-
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, you would also is correct.
So in-house, no, we contract.
Right, okay, so perfect. So for a city that has an in-house attorney, that's one type of expense, but for a city that contracts out, it's another type of expense to have to come back and do this sort of ordinance update. So Speaker Wilson agreed, and he personally went to bat to secure $4 million of one-time funding to help cities update subdivision ordinances. That money will be available come July. We're working through with the Department of Workforce Services exactly how that money will be made available and circulated over the next year or so for cities and towns to be able to access. So again, we're working on a variety of different issues. We're always trying to make sure we respect the role of cities, want the legislature to respect the role of cities, collaborate with us, and seek the outcomes that benefit our shared constituents. Do you want to take 1 minute and just reference the Utah County COG letter and how that changed?
Yeah.
With a final version of 499, and then we can open it up.
Sure, absolutely. So as I'm sure you are all aware, we hosted a couple meetings and I was able to come chat with you about it during the interim. Oh, if I can switch tabs without getting my Zoom on crazy. So HB 499 expanded this winter response plan. And the original draft of the bill, I think, was well-intended, but the language was really problematic, as the Utah County COG letter pointed out. And so, if we can pull this up. So originally, the language stated, and this is a really big document that essentially outlines the entire bill that's available on our website. We're happy to distribute it with you all as well. That essentially said that second-class counties, including Utah County, needed to essentially have a winter shelter. And that alarmed some folks, and understandably so. And so the letter went out, and we were able to work in some negotiations in the bill that still includes Utah County as a part of the solution, but is very locally driven as to what that looks like. So Utah County is expected to create a winter response plan for the winters, and I might have misspoken earlier, winters of 24, 25, and 25, 26. So it provides a 1-year runway. And what happens is the local homelessness coordinating council for MAG is going to essentially say, what is the unmet need in this area? And how do we meet that? And there's a lot of flexibility as to what that looks like. And so now, essentially, there's a requirement that a certain level of accommodation is available, but what that accommodation looks like is very flexible. And so it could be like this room could host 100 people. And so we are going to make sure that this room is available as a temporary shelter. It could also be that we're going to make sure that our existing domestic violence shelters are expanding to capacity, right? Like expanding existing facilities that provide support, or even doing things like expanded hotel motel voucher programs, so that essentially folks are going into existing shelters, but it's not necessarily a congregate facility in any one city. And so those changes were actually able to kind of wholesale alter the expectations of the bill, which we were pretty excited about overall.
So thank you for that letter, and thank you for the advocacy both within the LPC and elsewhere, not just on this issue, but on the 200+ bills that we were working on over the course of the session. All told, the reason we wanted to come back and report to you was we feel like this session was historic. We feel like we were able to respect the role of cities. We didn't win on everything. Clearly not. There are things that we didn't like that happened during the session, but all told, feel very positive about how the session turned out. Several of us, including Mayor Johnson, were in Washington, D.C. last week with the National League of Cities. In the battles over preemption and battles over state interference, traditional land use authority, they're happening everywhere. We actually, compared to other state leagues around the country, came out in a much better position than our other colleagues, and other states are actually looking to us to see how we navigated some of these battles. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the comments, the battles are never done. So the last pitch we want to make to you is, if there are topics that you as individual mayors or as a body want to bring forward for consideration within the UEOC and through the league, you can always let Molly or me know tonight. You can reach out to us anytime. You can reach out to Mayor Kafusi or Mayor Johnson or other members of the league board. The Legislative Policy Committee will meet again in May. You can bring points up then, and then we'll all be in hopefully sunny St. George. We all deserve a little bit of sunshine in a couple of weeks for the mid-year conference, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for that event. Any questions for us, or thoughts or feedback about the session? What went well? What you would have liked to have seen different? Commissioner.
Can we get copies of those slides sent out to all the mayors and commissioners?
We'd be happy to.
And I never brought it up in the past, but I'm curious what the mayors are thinking in relative to the 5th BIP. Should the county adopt that? And so it's not for discussion tonight, but I'd like to follow up.
That's even the question.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, we can vote on that right now.
Yeah, we can vote on that right now.
Can someone please make that motion? This says we can, guys, sorry.
Okay,
Not on the agenda.
I think you know our answer.
Silent ones on that side.
Well,
That's your march.
well, I think that they speak for us, or me.
I just want to say thank you. I'm not sure we thank you enough for everything that you do, not just during the session, but all year long, and everything that you do. And it's a lot of work. I mean, I can't even imagine the hours that you put in on our behalf for all the cities and towns in Utah. So I just want to personally say, here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It really is a joint effort. It's us as a staff, but it's the collective effort, because the strength of the league really is the membership. You know, Mary, you'll recall we had an early morning meeting at UVU with folks from Orem, Springville, Mapleton, Spanish Fork. and Woodland Hills with Representative Stephen White, where we walked through with him the housing preemption ideas that were coming from the private sector, and then our counter proposal. It was 7:30 in the morning at UVU, but we had a full room of city leaders with Representative White, who really emerged as a champion for good process and good policy. So those of you in South Utah County, please make sure to thank him. I know, didn't he come to your council meeting a couple nights ago?
He did. I think he's been over Spanish Fork also. We just express appreciation. I shouldn't say this, but I think he's a shining star. He's very good and he has incredible integrity.
Yep. And it was on full display this year.
Yeah. And he took on a very difficult issue. It was headed the wrong direction.
Yep, and ultimately help steer it to what I think in the long term will be good public policy. So thank you for the kind words, but it really is a collective effort. So please engage with us, and any other thoughts or questions or ideas anyone wants to bring up before they go home, or again, you can get a hold of us anytime this spring.
Thank you again from.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone.
Number 6, other business. Next meeting is scheduled for June 1st. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
1 second. First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.